Hello and welcome back. In this video I will discuss the basic logic setup that I used to create the gameplay aspects for my Calodan Magistrate challenge based on Chapter 13 of the Mandalorian titled The Jedi. So we'll start out by discussing all the creativity toys that we'll need to place around the toy box here. We're going to need a lot of these locators, but as we get into more specific details of the logic setup, I'll discuss connecting those locators as well as their placement throughout the toy box. We're going to need 7 of these trigger areas from Creativity Toys. This first one is used to start the challenge. A second trigger area used for the text displayers for when the player attempts to enter the town. A third trigger area used to open and close the main gate entrance doors to the town. A fourth trigger area also connected to the same text displayers for when the player attempts to enter the Magistrate's residence. A fifth trigger area which controls opening and closing the doorways to the Magistrate's residence. And a sixth and seventh one used for the text displayer for our prisoners when they ask us for help if you enter the trigger area. We also need 2 locking gate cages from Gameplay Toys. And 2 of these automatic double doors, one for the front door and one for the back door entering the Magistrate's residence. Alright, we'll start along the wall here with the rest of our logic pieces. From Instant Fun, the Sky Changer to set our sky. Boombox to control our 3 pieces of theme music, one for each phase of the game, the forest phase, the town phase, and then the boss fight phase. Of course, we'll need a challenge maker to control starting and ending the challenge. And 3 logic gates that are connected to that challenge maker. One for when invitees are accepted. A second logic gate that'll control everything that'll happen when the game is started. And a third logic gate that will control everything when the game is ended or completed. Associated with that logic gate are 2 time delayers. That will be discussed when we get to the ending or completing the game phase of our discussion in a later video. We have our blue team activator if you're playing double player. A level starter. And as we demonstrated in an earlier video, we have a hollow wall here which allows us a perfect space to hide all of our logic, as well as have easy access to it if you want to make any changes to your logic setup. We have 2 friend generators, one for each of our 2 prisoners. We have 2 text displayers that we use to control our text for when a player tries to enter the town or the Magistrate's residence if they haven't finished the enemy waves in those phases of the game. We have an effects generator that creates our smoke in both our forest area as well as inside the town. Alright, when the challenge starts, we have the bell ringing 3 times, similar to the TV episode. And it'll ring again when the town phase begins, so we'll need a sound effects generator from Gameplay Toys. A repeater. A time delayer to control how long the bell rings for. And a logic gate. This logic gate is used to create the enemy waves in both the forest phase and then again in the town phase of the game. For our forest phase, we're going to need 2 enemy generators enemy wave generators, I should say. A counter, which records when those enemy waves are defeated, allowing the player then to enter the town, which begins the town phase. And then a radar marker. When the force phase is completed, we have a little cutscene that focuses the camera on the Magistrate's hired gun, Lang. So we'll need the target camera, a first time delayer, an enemy wave generator to create Lang and his 2 HK-87 assassin droids, a second enemy wave generator, and a text displayer for when Lang asks the player, "What do you want?" And just showing that when that is complete, that will ring the bell again here using our sound effects and repeater logic before we begin the enemy waves inside the town, which is this row of logic toys here. So I have 4 enemy wave generators, 1 each for the first 2 main waves, and then 2 for Lang, and then I was using 4 droids to represent the assassin droids. You can combine this in one and make it just 3. In that case, you would set your counter to 3 instead of 4. I of course have my counter set to 4, and once again, once all the enemy waves are defeated in the town phase, this counter registers that and allows the boss fight phase to begin. And once again, a radar marker. Alright. So after the forest and town phases, we'll have our boss fight phase, which is the 3rd and final phase. So of course we'll need a boss fight spawner. And I set that to use Maul as my Magistrate. We'll need a replayer for when the boss fight is completed, to drop 2 keys by the locking gate cages so that we can release our prisoners. That's controlled by this counter, and when both prisoners have been released from their cells, the game has been completed. For our factory, our smokestacks here, for our fire and smoke effects, we have hidden back here a couple of effects generators. One that we'll be using for the smoke plume for each of the 3 stacks, and a second one that we'll use to create the fire effects. Okay, so that was all the logic tools that we need to create our challenge, and now we'll start looking more closely at the logic connections to start the challenge. We'll start with our Sky Changer here, and where we can find Syndrome Sinister Takeover Sky. We'll find it in the Disney Infinity 3.0 drawer down towards the bottom. And there it is. What I liked about this sky, besides just its kind of dark and gloomy look that gives a good effect for the game, I also like that it doesn't have any background scenery, no hills, no buildings. It's just the sky. I thought that worked well for this particular level. A little bit of fun with Boba here, and we'll fly across to our manufacturing facility, and we'll take a look at the effects generators for our smoke and fire effects. I've already moved our level starter over, and we have a couple of locators placed here. You'll need 3 for each of the 2 effects, 3 for the smoke and 3 for the fire. New locator connection, and then we connect it to the effects generator. and this one is already connected. And then I use the level starter to create these effects. So new logic connection, catalyze, and we'll come to this effects generator for our fire effects, and we're going to play looped, and we'll go down to the fire drawer and we'll select smoldering fire, and we'll come back to our level starter, new logic connection, catalyze, come to our second effects generator. We're going to play looped. We'll go down to the smoke drawer and we'll use smoke plume. Now the other locators have already been placed on the other two stacks, so we'll pick up our fire effects locator here and we'll place it on top of the stack, our third stack here. You can see the other locators are already in their positions. And we'll grab the other locator for our smoke plume, and we'll bring that up and place it one spot above our locator for the fire effect. And there we go. So 3 locators for each of the 2 effects, 3 for the fire and 3 for the smoke. Come back down here, we're going to grab our level starter, and we're going to make a few more connections on this for when the level loads. We'll first move over to the Magistrate's residence. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new logic connection to the boss fight spawner to turn it off. I created the level so that if the player doesn't want to immediately begin the challenge, they can explore the toy box without having any enemy attacks or boss fight attacks. So you turn this off so that when you wander into this area, you won't spawn the boss fight. Okay, we'll move out here as well. And we are going to do a new logic connection on catalyze. We're going to deactivate these 2 trigger areas. These are the trigger areas that will trigger the text displayers for our 2 prisoners to ask for our help if the player walks into these trigger areas. So we're going to deactivate them so they're not active when the player first loads the level. Alright, we'll come back to our level starter. Again, new logic connection on catalyze. And we are going to also deactivate this trigger area that's connected to the text displayer for when the player attempts to enter the Magistrate's residence prior to completing the enemy waves in the town phase of the game, which is the second phase of the game. So we're going to come back out here to the front of the wall, and we're going to make a similar connection for this trigger area that is also connected to the text displayers that tells the player that they cannot proceed into the town until they defeat all the enemies in the forest phase, which is the first phase of our game. So all of those 4 trigger areas are deactivated when the level loads. Okay, this is the trigger area that has been placed to start the challenge. So we're going to connect this to the challenge maker. So new logic connection entered by player any. And then we'll come over to our challenge maker and we'll select start game. We also have a couple locators here. Notice the blue dots are facing forward towards the wall. That's because that's the direction I want the players to face when the challenge starts. So we're going to connect the first one, new locator connection, all player 1 or blue team start location. Then we're going to connect the second one, new locator connection, and this will be for player 2. I tried this originally with just the one locator because all blue teams suggest that it should work for both players, but it didn't in my game, so that's why I went with the second locator. One for player 1 and a second one for player 2. And you can place these wherever you want your players to start the challenge. I kind of picked it in the middle part of the of our forest here, facing the main gate, just so the player was somewhat oriented as to where they were. Alright, now we're going to go to our challenge maker, new logic connection, invites accepted, and we're going to input into this first logic gate. We'll do another connection, new logic connection. When the game is started, we will input into the second logic gate. And again, new logic connection. When the game is ended, we will input into the third logic gate. Then I went back and did it also for new logic connection. When the game is completed, we will input into that third logic gate. That may be a little bit redundant, may not be necessary, but it works. So, the first logic gate will control everything that happens when the invites are accepted. The second logic gate will control everything that happens when the challenge starts. And this logic gate will control everything that happens when the player ends the challenge in the middle of the challenge or wins the challenge and completes it. So back to our invites accepted, new logic connection on output, we are going to deactivate our starting trigger area. And we'll come back to our invites accepted logic gate, new logic connection on output. We're going to go to our effects generator, play looped, down to the smoke drawer, and we will select large area smoke, and this starts the smoke in both the forest area as well as the town. We'll discuss the locator hookup later in the video. New logic connection again on output. Go to our blue team activator, and we will set all players to blue team in case you're playing with 2 players. Back to invites accepted, new logic connection on output. We are going to remove all for our friend generators. That's in case after the challenge was completed, if our prisoners were relocated or picked up and moved to another location, we want to remove them so that when we start the challenge and they're regenerated, they're back in the correct position inside their prison cells. So we're going to remove all for both of these friend generators. Alright, back to our invites accepted again, and we'll move inside the town and make a couple more connections here. So on output, we had deactivated, or actually we're going to reset our 2 locking gate cages because they were opened when we completed the game, when we won the challenge, so we need to reset both of these. And that wraps up all the logic connections for when the invites are accepted. I spoke too soon. Actually, we're going to do 3 more connections. We are going to reset our 3 counters. This counter is for our forest phase, and we're going to reset our second counter for the town phase. And we'll go back to invites accepted logic gate. Once again, new logic connection on output. And we'll go to our counter for when we free our 2 prisoners. we're going to reset that as well. This makes sure that all of our counters are back at 0 when the challenge is started or restarted if you're playing it multiple times. Now I think I can say that completed all of our connections. So we have our trigger areas, our effects generator, blue team activator, friend generators were removed, our prisoners. We've reset both locking gate cages, and we've reset the 3 counters that control the progress of the game from the forest phase to the town phase to the boss fight and game completion phase. Alright, now we can move on to the start logic gate. So on output, we're going to come over here to our boombox, and we're going to pick our music for our first phase of the game, which will be the forest phase. So under Moody, and we're going to use Micro Technor. Then there'll be a different piece of music for the town phase, and then a third piece of music for the boss fight phase. Alright, new logic connection on output. We are going to activate this trigger area, which will be used for our text displayer if the player attempts to enter the town. And new logic connection on output. We are going to deactivate the trigger area used to open and close the main entrance gate doors so that the player cannot enter the town until the enemy waves are defeated in the forest phase. We'll pick up our game start logic gate, make some more connections here for the town phase. Alright, new logic connection again on output. We will activate this trigger area, which will also be used for our text display if the player attempts to enter the Magistrate's residence before defeating the enemy waves. Again, another logic connection on output. We will deactivate the trigger area that's used to open the doors to the Magistrate's residence. Again, new logic connection on output. Just looking at my notes here. And we are going to activate this trigger area for the text displayer for that prisoner asking for help, and we'll repeat that on output. We'll activate this trigger area for prisoner number 2. Okay, we'll bring this back out front and we'll continue with our basic logic setup. So now when the game, when the challenge starts, we want to also generate our 2 prisoners. So we're going to hook up our locators, new locator connection. We'll connect this to our first friend generator. The second one's already connected. Notice the blue dot on the one on the left faces to the right, and the one on the right faces to the left. That's so that our prisoners face inwards towards the main path leading to the Magistrate's residence entrance. We're also setting the behavior for both of these under the properties drawer to stand still. So both friend generators will have the behavior set to stand still so that they don't move around. Now I can do a new logic connection on output when our challenge is started. Rise Against the Empire. And way down here I chose the male Tatooine 1 citizen. Many different choices you can go with. This is just what I happen to pick. Male Tatooine Citizen 1. And then again, new logic connection on output, come to our second friend generator, and Rise Against the Empire, and we're going to go down towards the bottom of the drawer again and pick female Tatooine citizen number 1. And there we go. So these will now be generated as soon as the challenge starts. Okay, so we have our boombox. We have activated our first trigger area, deactivated the second one. Our third trigger area for the text displayer, that's been activated. And the trigger area to enter the Magistrate's residence is turned off, and the 2 trigger areas for our text displayers for our 2 prisoners has been turned on, and we've generated both of our prisoners with the friend generators. Okay, to hook up our text, so when a player enters the trigger area, we're going to create a message. So under the negative drawer, we're going to select Not Right Now. And then the properties for this I set to text duration of 3 and set the text style to banner. New logic connection, when any text is dismissed, so after 3 seconds of Not Right Now being displayed, we will come over to this text displayer and we'll go to survival modes, and we will select defeat all enemies. And again, for this, the properties has been set to a duration of 3 seconds and banner text style. Just taking a look at the notes again. And we're going to do the same thing for this trigger area for when the player attempts to enter the Magistrate's residence during the town phase. So when entered by player any, we only need to input into this first text generator. Come back down to that same drawer, up negative, and Not Right Now. We don't need to make a second connection because that's already been connected. When this text is dismissed, it'll display the second message, defeat all enemies, from the second text generator, or text displayer as it is. Alright, so we're back in town, and we're going to discuss hooking up the logic for the doors for the Magistrate's residence. So we have these 2 automatic double doors from Gameplay Toys, face back to back. And notice when there's no logic hooked up to them, these doors will open and close when the player gets in range of them. As soon as you hook up logic to a door, then it's naturally in the locked position until some other logic is connected to cause that door to open and close again. So we're only going to do that for this outer door, the door facing the town. So this is the trigger area that's going to control that. So new logic connection when entered by player any, we are going to open this door. And then new logic connection when exited by player any, we will close the door. So this door is now in a naturally locked position. This door will have no logic connected to it, meaning it's free to open and close when the player is within range. It's only this first door that needs to be locked to prevent the player from entering until the enemy waves are defeated in the town phase of the game. So just to demonstrate, if I walk up to the door now with the logic connected, it won't open. But if I enter the trigger area, it opens, and when I exit the trigger area, it closes. I'm going to leave that trigger area in place where it is outside of the door for now, because we'll have more connections to do for that. Alright, continue with the remainder of our basic setup here. We'll take a look at our effects generator, and a lot of locators, 51 of them in total. 27 out here placed around the forest area, and another 24 placed inside the town to create the smoke effect. We also have our logic gate connection for when the invites are accepted to create the smoke. That's so that the smoke is there and in place by the time the enemies begin to generate when the game or the challenge is started. I'm going to pick up a locator here and to connect a locator to our effects generator. I had forgotten before to place our two friend locators for our friend generators. Locators for our friend generators. I left them outside, so taking a brief moment here to put those in position for our male citizen, Tatooine Citizen 1, and our female Tatooine Citizen 1, with the blue dots facing inwards towards the path. Alright, now we'll get back to talking about our smoke effects. So we have a locator, and we're going to connect it up to this effects generator. New locator connection. Effects location. Now I recommend when you're doing this, first connect all of your locators, however many you're going to use. Connect them all to your for the forest phase, and then for the town phase, connect all of them to your effects generator. Then set up a couple of buttons. The first one will turn it on. So I'm going to go to smoke. Large area smoke, and that was to play looped. And this one is going to be our off button, so when pressed we're going to stop looping effects. It's easier to place your locators once they've all been connected to your effects generator when they are producing smoke. This way you can place your locators throughout your toy box to get the desired amount of smoke coverage that you want for your game. So we'll hit our on button here, and we start generating our smoke effects. Of course, I'm going to be generating smoke effects throughout the entire forest and town because all of those other locators have been previously connected and placed. So notice there's a certain thickness to the smoke above and below your locator. The type of sky background you use will determine how high above the ground or below the ground you should set your locators. I found for this particular sky, given its dark look, I needed to go one spot below. Otherwise, the smoke was so intense that it made the visibility a lot worse than I wanted it to be for the player. So there's a couple options: one spot above the terrain or on the terrain, but notice how the visibility changes based upon how much smoke there is. So I went for this effect, one block below the surface of my terrain, and that's the visual effect I got for the smoke. Imagine 27 of these. If I was on the train or sitting one spot above the train, it did make the visibility near zero. I did the same thing in the town where I placed them one block below the surface of the terrain. For placement, I didn't place my locators until after I'd already created the toy box. So if you're doing this after you've created plating your buildings, your trees, I placed them above my toy box, up in the air here. I went 4 across and 3 wide on each side of the town. So a 4x3 pattern to get 12 locators here, and I repeated that on the other side of the main path, a 4x3 pattern. Then you can come back and with your spark mode and grab those locators and move them down to the ground level or below the ground level, wherever you decide to place your locators to generate your smoke. I used 27 out here, not quite as organized of a pattern as I did in the town with the 4x3 on either side of the path. I just placed them to put the smoke effects and give good coverage throughout the forest. Here under the hill, we see here this one for the smoke effects, it's 1 block below the surface. I placed one of these under each of the 5 hills in about the center position. And you can see how that effect is with the smoke, with the locators set 1 block below. 1 block below the surface of the terrain. Alright, you can turn that off. So that's the best way to place your locators for the smoke effects. First, connect all of them. Hook up your buttons to turn them on and turn the smoke effects back off. Place them, and then you can delete your buttons because they won't be necessary anymore. My next video will discuss the logic setup for the forest phase of the challenge. Until then, be safe and be well, and thanks for watching.